Hello, this is the high-level overview of the Easy Dialog asset. So this is good for people who are looking to get started with the asset or if you're looking to see what it is. I'll be covering a high-level overview. So the Easy Dialog asset is a node-based dialog editor tool that lets you structure and get your dialogue that you write in an easy way. It does not handle the display of the dialogue, so in this video I'll be going over the example that I have supplied in the package. I'll be going through the node-based editor tool that I used to make the text for this, as well as what I have supplied in the Easy Dialog API interface that you'll have to communicate with, as well as what I would expect you to write in order to interface with this that is also supplied in this scene. So to get started, let's just quickly jump in, hit play, and go through the dialogue. So we'll hit N. Here we meet Waldo, who's telling us how to progress dialogue. The teacher tells us how to pick different options using 1, 2, or 3. Right now, we get this branching dialogue option. So we can hit 1, 2, or 3, or just click on the option here to select the option. And then we can keep progressing the dialogue. And we're talking to Waldo, and then here we hit a weird section of the dialogue where we jump into this override character, and we're kind of jumping into a new conversation. I'll show a bit more on that later. For now, I'm just going to skip it out of ease. So we're going to skip until we're back in the main graph. And then we see that we'd like to repeat the dialogue encounter. So if we hit yes, we go back to the beginning and we can click all the way back through all of that dialogue. And then if we hit no, the dialogue ends right there. And we can redo it if we would like. And I can hit Q to quit the dialogue at any point in case I want to. So now that you've seen what the sample scene does, let's look at the implementation in the X node. So in the sample scene, under Easy Dialog Samples Minimal Implementation, I've supplied a folder of dialog graphs. So if you double click on the intro graph, it'll bring up the X node graph view for the dialogue. So right off the bat, we say, hello there, I am character name. Let's go through, press the N key to continue. So right here you can see that we have character name that's being dynamically swapped out with Waldo's name, the associated character of this dialog node. So this is the entire dialog graph, and the graph is made up of many dialog nodes. So the nodes all represent basically a piece of the dialogue, and you can make new ones by right-clicking or dragging off. And all dialogue starts from the root node, which you can change if you right-click and click Make Root Node. So you can control the flow of dialogue from this to this one by dragging. So next we talk to this teacher, which explains the branching dialogue options. Then we get a dialogue with branching options. So you can basically click this Has Player Responses button, and you can specify all different types of responses if they fit. From here we have different dialogue depending on which option you've picked, and then they all funnel back up into this jump node that I'll discuss in a second. From there we say that we're back in the main graph, and then we see if we'd like to repeat the dialogue encounter. So if no, then we don't do anything, the graph is done, and we exit the dialogue. But if yes, you'll see that we do a jump node. And this is the easiest way to explain the jump node, is that basically you supply a node, which is one of these pieces of dialogue that you want to go to, and you can specify a character that you'd like to override the text with. So in this case, we are jumping to the very first part in the intro. So we're jumping way back to here so that we can repeat this whole dialog encounter up until we hit no. And then once the dialog encounter returns, that comes right back up to the jump node, and then it continues off the next node. So in this example here, earlier, we have the question about if you'd like some coffee, and then we have a jump node, and then we're back into the main graph. However, if we hit play here, you'll see that between the coffee, you'll see right here, he's going to get my drink. Then we go into the override, and we're jumping and doing all this stuff. And then we're saying we're back in the main graph after all of that. So we actually can not only supply nodes within our own graph, but we can also supply a node that's from an entirely different graph that I have over here. So here we have dialog with no character assigned. It says that we're injecting into the conversation. We prepare for jump. And we do another jump into this deeper graph here. And then once that returns, it comes right back up to this test jump. We say that we're in the first jump. So you'll see that there's no associated character, but the jump node provides a character override of the override character. So when we go into the game and we get to that spot in the dialog, we are actually jumping into this other graph right here, and we're overriding the character with the override character as it says right here. And then we jump deeper into the second jump and jump into the third jump, and then come back up to the second jump, the first jump, and then back into the main graph here. So when we finally return, we come back right here. So that kind of shows the flow of dialogue and what you can do with the jump nodes, shows character names being supplied, as well as branching. And so now the main important thing that I want to show is what I've supplied through this API and what you will need to supply. So I've split the scene into the important and not important sections. In the important section, you'll see the Easy Dialog Manager. This is the only attached script in this scene, and this is the primary interaction that you'll have with the Easy Dialog asset. So you can see here in the inspector that we have a player character name, a default null character, a character name lookup, which is character name, which is what we used here to determine if we should swap the name Waldo, as well as some dynamic text replacers such as the player name and Chris, so we can add more dynamic text into here that show up and then get replaced with this string here. So this script has three main points of interaction: the start dialog encounter, which gets a graph supplied; the get next dialog, which takes a graph, it gives you a dialog line out, and you also supply the choice that you made, as well as a quick end dialog encounter if you want to just kill dialog early. And so all of these, the start dialog and the get next dialog, return you the text, the character that's speaking, as well as the player responses through this dialog line struct. So if I hit F12 on this, you'll see that we go to the structs CS file, and we can see that we are supplying a character, the character's text, an array of player responses, as well as a Boolean function that checks if there are player responses. So you can see that the API here is pretty simple. And now I'll jump over to the dialog manager, which is what I would expect someone like you to supply in order to actually take this text that I'm getting back from these nodes and displaying it. So on the dialog manager, I'm supplying the UI elements for the image, the character's name, and the character's dialogue, as well as the UI text for the player choices and the start graph that we want to play. So if I jump back over to the dialog manager, this file is covering everything. We have the attributes that I just covered. We have the initialization and references. We handle the input and update. And then we have the main functionality, in which we have start dialog and counter, get next dialog, and a quick end dialog that you can call by pressing the Q key. And then we have some helper functions that basically just take text and display it to the screen. So this is basically just interacting with the UI, showing UI. All that you really need to know is the start dialog and counter and get next dialog. And here is the API overlap. So we have a dialog graph that we want to start dialog for, and then we call EasyDialogManager .start dialog and counter, and we specify the graph, and it returns us that struct that has the character's name and the text and the player responses. And then I just call my internal function that I have here in my helper functions to actually display the text. Same with next dialog. It's almost as simple. First, I'm just checking if we have a dialog graph set, and if we do, I'm calling get next dialog, and this returns true or false based on if there was a next dialog to get. So if true, it's supplying the information into this dialog struct that we're passing as an out parameter here. And then we are displaying the text if there was anything to display. And if not, we are assuming that the end of the dialog graph has hit because we don't have any future things to see. And so I'm just initializing the dialog and hiding it. And the end dialog function, when you hit the Q key, it just kills the dialog. All that's doing is just calling EasyDialogManager.endDialog, and then it's initializing the text. So all you really need are these 20 lines of code to interact with the EasyDialog Manager and a graph, and you're all set. You can have different implementations. So if I take the if I take the dialog manager that I was just showing you and I change out the graph to be the how to play graph, for instance, and I save the scene, you can see that this graph, all that's in here is this one node that has the override character and tells you how to play. If I hit play and hit next, we can see that come up, and then that's it. So you can pretty easily swap out graphs and be able to have all different kinds of dialogue and counters. So that's the high-level overview. I'll be coming out with more tutorials and more in-depth looks into the EasyDialog Manager, and I'll be pushing out more updates. So please email me if you have any questions. Thank you.